All right, so now that we have our form hooked up and we have it so that when we submit it, we can just get the values from the state. But what we want to do is we want to work with our context, okay? We want to work with our provider and state and all that, and we want to call an action, or I should say an action type. So if we open our context.js, when we click the delete button, it calls, remember we used the dispatch that's in the state. We called that function, passed in a type of delete contact, and then it ran this and it deleted it from the state. We want to do the same kind of thing with add contact. So let's just copy this whole case right here and put it right under, and we'll change this to add contact. And obviously we don't want to do the filtering out. We're not deleting something, we're adding to it. So we want to return an object, and we want the initial state, so we're using the spread operator. And you can see how important the spread operator is when you're dealing with immutable state. So we want to take contacts, which is the array of objects of contacts, and then we basically want to take our payload that we're going to send, which will be the entire contact with the name, email, phone, and ID and stuff. And that'll be in the payload. So we're going to say action.payload. And we just want to add that onto our current contacts in our state. So we use the spread operator and state.contacts. And that will add on the new contact. So let's save this. Okay, so now we should be able to run our dispatch and call this. Now everything we're doing is completely local, obviously. Later on, I'm going to show you how to implement HTTP requests to a backend. This is not a full stack course. We won't be building an API. I do have a course called MERN Stack Front to Back for that, where we start off by building a Node and Express API, and then we create a React app on top of it using Redux. But we are going to be using something called JSON placeholder, which is a fake REST API or a mock API that we can make requests to, and it'll give us responses back. So the front end will still work like it's a full stack app, but for now everything is pure local. So there's nothing else we have to do here. We have to now call the dispatch in the add contact, but remember, whenever we want to deal with the context, we have to bring in our consumer and use that so that we can access that value property, which has the dispatch on it. So let's import consumer. Okay, so we want to import consumer from, and we need to go 2 levels up to context. Is it 2 levels? Yep, to context. And then down here in the render, we have to, of course, return our consumer. And let me see. Okay, so we're still going to be pulling this stuff from state. We want to leave that. And I'm going to go above this return for now. Instead of like trying to weave in the consumer and the value and stuff into here, I like to just create a new one and then just bring what I need up and then delete this. That's how I operate. That's how I do. So let's return, we'll open some parentheses and we'll say consumer, because if you do it the other way, you start getting confused on, like, you know, what curly braces end where and in parentheses, and it gets confusing. So we'll just start over up here and move up what we want. So in the consumer, we put an expression and we get the value, which includes the entire state, because that's what we put in it. So value, we're going to point this to a set of curly braces, and in this set of curly braces, I'm going to use a little bit of destructuring, and I'm going to pull out the dispatch function from the state, so, or from, I should say, the value, which contains the state. So value, we're going to pull out that. All right, and then underneath that is where we want to return all the stuff we have below. So let's go ahead and grab from this div all the way down to this div. We'll cut that out, and then we can just get rid of, whoops, I've missed a div. So all of this JSX, whoops, too fast. Yeah, so right here, we'll cut that out, get completely rid of this return right here, and stick that right in here. Okay, so we save this. It should still work. Everything looks good. Now we have access to the dispatch, which will allow us to call an action. It'll allow us to call that add contact. Now, what I want to do is have the on submit. Okay, so we have an on submit, which is, where the heck is it? Right here. We want to pass in the dispatch so that we can use it inside of on submit. So we can do that by simply saying .bind, and we want to pass in this, and we want to pass in dispatch. That way we can use that function inside of the on submit. Okay, so we'll go up to the on submit, and this is going to take in, let's see, the event is going to be last, so we're going to say dispatch and then the event. Okay, we want to still prevent default, and then we want to get our values from the state, so I'm going to use destructuring for that. So we'll say const, we want to get the name, the email, and the phone from this dot state. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to construct a new contact object. So new contact, and set that to an object. Now, when we submit this, I mean, we have the name, email, and phone. So, and we can use ES6 syntax and just do name, email, phone. And if you guys haven't seen this before, basically if it's name, email, if it's the same, if the key and value are the same, you don't need to put both. You can just do that. Now we do need an ID, okay? Because when we submit this, our state, if you look at our where is it, our context file, they have IDs associated with them. Now, I don't want to hard code an ID because every single contact that we add will then have the same ID. So we want to generate one, and there's a really nice small package that we can install from NPM called UUID, which will give us a UUID version 4, I think, which is just a specific formatted ID. So I'm going to open up my terminal here, and let's clear this out, and we're going to npm install UUID, and this is very, very easy to use. Literally all you do is bring it in and call the UUID function, and it'll generate an ID. So let's go up here and let's import UUID from UUID. Okay, and then for an ID, all we have to do, let's go right here and say ID, and we want to say UUID, and we want to run that function. That will generate an ID for us, okay, a unique ID. And then all we have to do is call dispatch. So dispatch, and we want to pass in an object with a type and a payload. So type is going to be add contact, and the payload is going to be the new contact. Oops. Okay. So again, just to reiterate, everything is in state, all these inputs. So when we submit it, we're pulling it out of the state. We're generating an ID with UUID, constructing a new contact. We're going to call the dispatch method, and we're going to send a type of add contact, which is going to trigger this right here. Okay, and we're sending the new contact as the payload, and then here we're just going to update the state by adding the new contact. So let's make sure everything is saved, and let's try it out. So we'll say Harry Smith, phone number, whatever, it doesn't matter. And let's add contact. There we go. Harry Smith gets added, and let's see, we have his email, we have his phone number. Very cool. And let's just make sure that we have no strange errors or warnings. Okay, good. If we look inside of our React DevTools, we should now see that new contact component that has Harry in it, so which is right here. And notice the key. See this ID right here? This is the ID that was generated. And if we just look down here, this is the ID that was generated with the UUID package. Okay, so it's pretty handy if you need to just generate IDs on the fly. It's a very handy module that is very easy to use. And then we can delete Harry if we want, and he goes away. All right. One thing we should do is clear this. Okay, so once we submit, we probably want to clear it. So, and I'm going to add some validation as well, because right now, you know, we can, I think we'll be able to submit an empty. Yeah, we see we don't want this to happen, so we will be adding some validation here. But let's have it clear, so that's going to be pretty easy. We just need to clear the state. So we'll go back to add contact, and let's go, we'll go under the dispatch and say this dot set state, and let's set name to nothing, because remember the inputs are part of the state. So email nothing, phone nothing, and we can put a comment in here if we want. So clear state. I know I haven't been commenting much, but it's pretty self-explanatory. When you write good, decent code, you shouldn't really need to have a lot of comments. It should be pretty self-explanatory what's happening. Eggs, milk. This is from a different application. So let's try it again and make sure that it gets cleared. So we'll say Fred Jackson, Fred. Okay, and now you can see that this gets cleared out, which is what I want. Good. Now, in programming, we have something called the DRY principle, which is don't repeat yourself. And if we look at the add contact down here, and we look at the fields, we have the div with the class of form group, and then we have a label, an input, and we have a bunch of attributes here. And all of these are basically the same, except they take in different data, like placeholders, different stuff like that. So this is a really good opportunity to create a new component for our input groups, or our text groups, or whatever you want to call them, so that each of these is its own component, and then we can just pass in this stuff as props. So the type, the name, the placeholder, we can pass that stuff in as props. And it'll be stateless. We don't need state because everything comes from the properties. So it can be a stateless functional component. So that's what we're going to do in the next video, is we're going to create a component for each of these input groups. All right, so I'll see you in the next video.